you've got a flyer about, or not flyer, brochure, pamphlet, whatever we call it, piece of paper, about discount points in this thing here. I suggest you read over it. Discount points is one of those things that the math is maddeningly simple. But the concept is much harder to get your mind wrapped around, okay? And if you don't understand the concept, you can't understand the math of it. So, let's talk about how banks make money. In the original days of mortgages, how did lenders make their money? Through what? Interest. Interest paid over the life of the loan, right? Now, what if I told you that the borrower has the ability to lower that interest rate? Would most people want a lower interest rate so they pay less interest over the life of the loan? Do you agree that sounds pretty good? Does that sound good to the lender? Depends. If I'm not making my money over the life of the loan, when had I better be making it? Up front, right now. So here's what discount points are. They're interest paid in advance. If you pay for things, how many of you have ever booked a hotel room and if you pay for it up front, you get a lower rate than if you reserve it and you wait and pay later on? How many of you have ever seen something like that, right? So, think about that and apply it to discount points. If you pay up front, do you think you're going to pay the same amount you would have paid over the life of the loan in interest, or are you going to get a discount on it? Are you going to pay less? You're going to pay less. So the idea of discount points is the borrower wants to pay some interest up front in exchange for less interest over the life of the loan. Does that make sense for everybody? Good. So far you're not confused. That's an accomplishment. So far. So, the problem comes in on the math with two different numbers being associated with discount points. I'm going to tell you there's one number associated with discount points that you need to remember. The number 8. How many of you can remember the number 8? You can remember that. Did you say Kobe? He's like 400 years old, man. You got to get a new, more relevant, number to remember. I could have thrown out 23 and have been just as relevant, right? So, the number 8 is important with discount points because that is the amount, that's how you're going to figure the amount that the interest rate is going to change. Remember, I said they're paying interest up front in exchange for a lower what over the life of the loan? Interest rate, right? That's how we lower or raise the interest they pay over the life of the loan, is give them a lower interest rate over the life of the loan. Does that make sense? So we need to know how much a discount point changes that interest rate. Everybody with me? And by the way, is it going to change it up or down? Down. A discount point is going to lower the interest rate. So, the important thing to ask is, how much does it lower the interest rate? What did I say the important number was? Now, knowing what you know about interest rates, do you think a discount point is going to lower the rate by 8%? No. 1/8 of 1% is how much a discount point changes your interest rate. 1/8. So, if I wanted to change the rate by a full percent, how many discount points would I have to buy? 8 of them. Does that make sense for everybody? Now, do you have a button on your calculator that looks like this? Do you have that? Does this not sort of look like this with numbers plugged into it? Right? So, if I wanted to find in numbers how much a discount point changed the rate, couldn't I type into my handy dandy calculator 1 divided by 8? How much are we changing the rate? 0.125%. So, if I started at 7%, I had a 7% loan, and I bought 1 discount point, am I raising or lowering the rate by that 0.125%? So I start at 7, and I subtract 0.125. 6.875 is my new interest rate on that loan. Does that make sense for everybody? That is how discount points work. Now, let me show you how complex they are. If I'm buying 2 discount points, it's going to be 2 divided by 8. If I'm buying 5 discount points, it's going to be 5 divided by 8 to calculate how much they change. I know I sound like an idiot, but I'm telling you, you'll get it confused.
Will they ever give you like 9 discount points?
No.
Okay.
But even if they did,
it'd be 9 divided by 8.
it'd be 9 divided by 8, right? Remember, that's how you calculate how much the rate is going to change. So with this 5 discount points, run that out. How much is my rate going to change here? 0.625. Well, I said I started at 7. What's my new interest rate?
6.375.
What is the 7?
That's my starting interest rate. I just made it up.
Okay.
I just said I had a loan that started at 7% interest and I bought 5 discount points. What's my new interest rate? So the 5 over 8 tells me how much the rate changes, right? That tells me how much the discount points are going to change the rate.
How do you buy a discount point?
You pay money.
So like,
Midway through the loan?
I didn't
No,
know about
when you originate the loan.
What did I get, 1%?
I'm sorry?
Like, what does a normal
What do
loan get?
What do you mean, what does a normal loan get?
Like, I don't remember saying I want this percentage of discount points when I,
So you probably didn't buy any discount points, which means you got the straight up market rate, whatever the market rate was. This would be a way you would lower your rate below the market rate. So in this case, our market rate was what? 7%. That means if I walked in the bank and I took out a loan that day and I didn't buy any discount points, I got a 7% interest rate. Does that make sense for everybody? But I didn't want a 7% interest rate, so I paid for 5 discount points. And I was able to lower my rate to 6.375%.
And the lender sets the rate for the discount point, what the cost is per point?
No, we're going to talk about that in just a second. We're going to talk about the cost of a discount point. But does everybody understand the change it makes on the loan? Are we good on that part so far? Is everybody okay on that? Now, I'm going to blow your mind here, I promise. I hope not. 8 is still the magic number, folks. If I tell you, Travis walked into the bank and market rates were 6.75%, and he bought his loan down to 6%, I want to know how many discount points he had to buy to do that. Here's how you figure that out. Figure out how much the rate changed. Can't we do that? We can figure out how much the rate was changed by the discount point. How much was it changed? 0.75. What's the magic number?
8.
8. We're going to divide it by 8, or we're going to multiply by 8?
Multiply.
We're going to multiply by 8. Sorry, I'm answering the question on 9. How many discount points was it? 6 points. So, I had to buy 6 of these things to lower that rate from 6.75% to 6%. Does everybody see that?
My mind is blown.
Mine is longer. Doesn't take much. Are we okay so far? Now notice I've said a bunch of times I had to buy these things. What usually comes along with things I have to buy? A cost, right? I have yet to say anything about how much these discount points, these magical things that lower my interest rate, are going to set me back. Is everybody with me on that so far? Have you heard me say anything about how much the cost is? Now, here's where the confusion starts. Because I'm going to give you a different percentage and you're going to get it confused. And that's why I tell you you're going to get it confused, because hopefully you won't. If I warn you about it in advance, you won't confuse it. How much does a discount point change the rate? 1/8 of 1%, right? Here's what you pay for that. What you pay for lowering that rate by 1/8 of a percent is 1% of the loan.
Each point is 1%.
Each point costs 1% of the loan balance. How much does each point change the rate? 1/8 of a percent. But how much does each point cost us in fees? 1% of the loan balance. So in our example over here, Travis was taking out a $200,000 loan. And I want to know how much it cost him to lower the rate from 6.75% to 6%. Well, we already figured how many points that is. How many is it? 6 points. Each one cost how much?
$2,000.
Each one costs $2,000, or 1% of the loan, right? So if he's buying 6 of them, couldn't we just say 6% of the loan? Right?
Yeah.
$200,000 times 6%, right? 12 grand.
Yep.
So, to lower my interest rate 0.75%, I would have to pay $12,000 out of pocket up front on the day of closing.
Is there a limit of points?
Do people do this? No, not in today's lending world.
Well, does it lower what you're paying in interest over the long run?
It does, substantially. What's the magic number with discount points? 8. That's also the magic number of years it takes you to recoup what you paid for them. It takes about 8 years before you start to realize a savings on the interest. How many people keep their loans, not their property, but their loans, for longer than 8 years now? Not very many. So the only way you actually come out better with discount points is if you keep the loan longer than 8 years, and since most people refinance much more often than that, not very many people pay for discount points anymore.
I keep on forgetting about finance, and I'm like, I don't want to say that you're wrong on that.
What's that?
People keeping their loan, I thought you meant like paying it off in 8 years. Most people.
Oh, no.
I was like,
They refinance. You know, most people don't. Most people take a lot longer than 30 years to pay it off because they continually refinance and push it back out to 30 years.
yeah.
Okay? But in this case, it would take you 8 years to recoup that $12,000. Now, after 8 years, if you kept the loan for 20 years, or if you kept it the whole 30 years, would you come out a lot better?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Here's how you do the math to figure that out. How much did we lower? What you would do is figure out how much the payment dropped, right? And multiply that times 12 months, a year, times 300, times 30 years, right? And you'd figure out, this is how much less interest I pay over the life of the loan, and this is how much it costs me. But that's only if you keep the loan for all 30 years. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand the math of these? Okay. Now the next statement, if it blows your mind, just forget it. The question was, do people do these in the real world? And the answer is yes, but they do them in reverse.
We're just going to forget that. I don't even
What's a discount point? I'm doing what?
Lower.
But I'm doing what? I'm paying money now in exchange for a lower rate in the future, right? What's the backwards of that?
Lower right now.
No down
Higher
payment.
rate.
Higher rate in exchange for what? I'm not paying now, I'm what?
Lower principal.
What's the opposite of paying, folks?
Receiving.
Pay later.
Interest.
What's the opposite of paying?
Not collecting.
Collecting, say that again. Getting paid is the opposite of paying, right? I'm getting paid now in exchange for a what kind of interest rate later on? A higher interest rate. So when would my lender pay me money? How many of you have ever heard of closing costs? How many of you have ever heard of a no closing costs loan? Where the hell do you think they get off writing loans and not charging you any money for? Well, they don't. You accept a higher interest rate, and the lender gives you a credit back for some amount of money in exchange for you taking a higher rate, and you use that credit to pay your what? Not your loan, but your closing costs, so that you don't have any closing costs. You use the credit that they just gave you to pay your closing costs. So the answer to your question is, do people do this? Yes, every single day. They just do them in reverse. It's called a credit.
Put on the back.
They're paying a higher interest rate. Those of you that were here on Sunday, we talked about upfit, right? Remember when I talked about upfit on leases? And I said, the tenant can pretty much set how much their upfit is, right? Because if they want more upfit, what do they agree to pay over the life of the lease? Higher rent every month. Discount points work the same way. If I want to pay less every month, I pay more up front. If I want to pay less up front, I pay more every month, and I can pretty much pick which way I want to go. I can make my payment as low as I want to make it. I can make it as high as I want to make it, within reason. Does that make sense? Does everybody follow that? So yes, discount points are still used, and just most often now used as credit. And here's the reason why. Interest rates are already so low. Does it really matter to somebody to get a 3.5? What would somebody rather have? A 3.5% interest rate loan for 30 years where they have to pay $5,000 out of pocket, or a 3.75% interest rate loan where they pay nothing out of pocket? 3.75 where they pay nothing out of pocket.
Take that money, that $15,000, whatever it may be, and just put it towards your down payment.
Because that $15,000, or $5,000 in my example, would lower your monthly payment by a whopping $19. So which would people rather do? Put $5,000 in their pocket right now, or pay $19 a month? Think about how people are wired. What should they do and what they do are two entirely different things. They probably should put it toward the down payment so they have the equity in the property. But most people would rather pay the extra $19 a month. So what they're willing to do is take the higher rate so they don't have to pay the closing costs now.
Well, some people make a big deal over $19 a month.
Well, some people do, but they make a bigger deal over $5,000 right now. See, it ain't you don't get away with both of them. You got to pay one or the other of them. And so it's, the question of which do you have. And for some people, it's not a question of which they want to do, it's a question of which they can afford to do. Some people simply cannot afford to pay the closing costs. There are some people who don't have that extra $5,000 in closing costs. They don't have any choice but to do these lender credits that help offset. And what's the other entity that could pay your closing costs other than the lender? The seller. So all you're doing there is jacking up the purchase price and asking the seller. Either way, you're paying it. You're financing it either way. You're either taking a higher rate or you're putting more in the loan, one of the two, as a buyer. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. Now, do you understand the math of these things? The math of discount points. All right, in your packet here, you got some discount point questions before you leave. All right. One last thing I need to talk to you about is a loan-to-value ratio before I turn you loose on these three questions. A loan-to-value ratio is simply the percentage of the value of the property that you're borrowing. So if I say you're getting an 80% loan-to-value loan, what percentage of the value of the property are you borrowing? 80%. So to calculate the loan amount, you would take the sales price and multiply by what? 80%, the loan to value ratio. Okay, so do those three questions. Finish it, I'm done.
How many, all three?
I'm going from memory, I didn't write it down, hold on, you might be, hold on. Oh, you're right, sorry,
Okay.
you write it down. Since my memory's apparently not good.
Then it was 160.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Have a good night.
No points is right.
Is that right?
No, because
No,
if it's 4 points,
well, it's not,
how much does each point cost?
because I don't really need one.
You figured out the number of points correctly. So how much does 1 point cost?
Says 1% of the loan.
Yeah, right, so,
Yeah, I know, that's what.
where did you figure out 1% of the loan?
I guess I didn't.
I don't see it.
Okay. So, that's the loan.
That's right.
I used to do that all in August, the whole time,
Understand.
first class. I used to overthink everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used to do all
That's
that.
1 point.
That's 1 point times 4.
There you go.
11.
That's how much it's going to be.
Okay.
Points is right. Numbers is
And that's what I've been doing so well in this class, like, without overthinking, I really, I
the
can
loan amount. All right, so, what do you, multiply times 4%?
see, that's why you were right.
That number goes.
My first day back to work, so we're up since 4 o'clock. I'm tired.
Amount
It's
of
all right,
points,
though. I'm back in this long schedule, yes. I'm in late
figure out
class.
the change,
I got a lot of today, so
figure out how much it changed, what was the change in the rate.
yeah, I bet. I'm not getting up early.
Because then you get how many points. Then when you get up here, you'll figure out the change. This ain't no more complicated, except you probably need to use a calculator for it. She had 4.25 and she went to 3.875.
I know the rate.
This is what I got.
I'm gonna holler at y'all.
Do the same math you did over here.
I may be able to, I'm tired.
Stop thinking so hard as you do. You took the first rate, right, and subtracted the new rate. So write it down. Calculate it down. Why don't you hit the percent button? It's not the number. 375 is how much the rate comes. When you hit minus, you probably hit the percent. So that's the change. Now, here, when you got the change, you multiply times 8, right?
Yeah, I see the question.
You multiply that number times 8.
Those should
And that's the number of points.
I mean, not now.
Go. How much they would have to close. I'm sorry for something. No, you're fine. I'm trying to remember the steps.
0.75, is that added to it? What are you paying? What
That
number
is-
it
It's going up, right? No, no, it's going down.
What is it going down? That's number one, you're right. So here, you're right, it's 6 points.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I backed into it using a little equation there, so it's 0.75, right?
Yep.
But which one is she add? Purchase 6 discounts, so she's going
It's
down.
going down.
We got this 4 points.
assume y'all had the same number out there, y'all about to compare it. 11,250, 48, and
Yeah.
4.5.
Any help with that? Son?
Huh?